Welcome to China News Update. A Taiwanese singer named Tank recently made a post that shocked everybody. He says he received a double organ transplant of heart and liver in China back in November of 2024. Now, this has sparked a lot of discussions online surrounding the source of the organ donation. And according to his post, Tank thanked his organ donor who was allegedly brain dead. Now, here's the catch, because in China, there's no legal definition of a brain dead patient. And so that's where things are quite interesting, which we're going to talk in more details. As well as Trump's tariffs, we're going to analyze a little bit of China's response and what exactly is going on the side of impact when it comes to China's manufacturing. So recently, there's been so many cases of people going to the hospital for unrelated health issues, and then the doctor declaring that they're brain dead. And so this has sparked a wave of people saying that, well, now they need a lot of organ sources, and declaring brain dead in China is a way for them to say that, okay, you can now donate your organs. Now, the problem is China has never legally categorized what is brain dead. There's cardiac arrest, there's, death because of a heart shutting down. But when it comes to any organ harvesting, back in the days, like the early 2000s, you would essentially would have is something called an organ donation pathway, or you would have, race against time, these terms popping up in reports about organ harvesting and organ donations, because, well, they simply had to transport the organs from somewhere across the country to the location to be used. Whereas nowadays, they seem to have cultivated this new way with forced organ harvesting, which essentially has a ready to off someone system, right? So you have a list of people who are ready to be taken away and done things to because, well, somebody else needs the organ. In the post, Tank says that he essentially started to have body functions shut down in early November. And then by mid to late November, they found a organ donor who, by the way, if you want to do a double organ transplant, your compatibility with that donor must be really high, because otherwise the antibodies in your system would actively reject and attack those organs that you receive. So this person had to be highly compatible with Tank in order to get this done, right? So that's a big suspicious point. He also was allegedly the first case in this very rare type of surgery. Double organ transplant is very rare. Heart and liver double transplant is equally rare, if not more rare. And so him being the first case to be done in China. Also, this hospital, the Zhejiang University No. 2 Hospital, has been notoriously known to do liver transplants using forced organ harvesting supplies. And before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we have China News Update every single week to get you caught up on the latest when it comes to news about China. So all of these things lining up, it doesn't make sense. And also considering that he's Taiwanese, why would he go to China to do a organ transplant? Because, well, for one, the wait list or the wait time in other countries than China is usually months to years, and many patients end up dying waiting for an organ. But in China, you can get something within a week or so, and that's virtually impossible in every other country. The issue here, though, is that Taiwan actually in 2015 had outlawed organ tourism in mainland China, and that they will punish, here quote, any brokerage, organ trading, or organ tourism in Taiwan or abroad, regardless of whether it's punishable under foreign laws, is subjected to a 1 to 5 year prison sentence in Taiwan. If doctors engage in brokerage, their license will be revoked. So there are specific laws in Taiwan that bans Taiwanese citizens from engaging in this. But why could Tank do this in China? Well, he previously sang patriotic songs for the CCP. He does active entertainment gigs in mainland China. So for him, this is not a problem, right? He thanked everybody from the doctors to the team of his, to his family members. He did thank the donor, but he didn't mention the name of the donor. He just said that, oh yeah, we're now a part of the same body, which is very interesting because, usually it's a very noble, it's a very honorable thing to donate your organs, right? It's very respectful that you mention the name of the person who did, except he didn't. Which, again, does he really even know who gave the donor the organs to him? Talk about the Trump tariffs on China. As we speak, there's now 104% tariffs, not accounting for the potential of buying Venezuelan oil, which is another 25%, plus the existing Biden-era tariffs, another 20%. But just the tariffs alone is at 104%. Now, China has retaliated by boosting their own reciprocal tariffs to 84%, which is their way of saying that we're not backing down in this trade war. But also, speaking of where things are right now in China, we're looking at one key area, and that is manufacturing. So there's been videos and a lot of different notices that companies, manufacturing companies, factories put out saying that they're going on holidays or taking a break with undecided date of return to work. The reason obviously is that there's less orders from the United States because of the tariffs, and that in some cases it's more expensive to operate the machines than to shut down. So what videos like this show here is you see the factories obviously not working, production line is empty, everybody's going home. Some are getting compensated for I think 50 to 60 yuan a day, which is like $1 or $2. It's not a lot. So employees are obviously having to find different jobs or just looking at where the things are going with this industry in China. Here, Crypto Finance recently did a local factory interview in Zhejiang province. Now, these factories, they used to go from making millions of dollars because of the exports of manufacturing goods to now clearing out the inventory to just survive. Each of these clothing is a story of what they're calling the cold winter of the factory. So the machine is not running. There's no money to be made. Like I mentioned, the cost of running the machine is higher than what they make in terms of like they're losing money, right? Decreasing profit. So a lot of this is pushing clothing factories to a dead end. The owner of one factory said, there's no business this year, it's just good enough to survive. 70% of the socks you buy online comes from Datong Sock City in Zhuji, Zhejiang province. And this story goes with other parts of the country as well, these manufacturing hubs, especially in southern China, right? It's deserted now. A lady boss here says that previous years she could make a stable gross profit of about 300,000 to 400,000 yuan. And that's about 9,000 to 10,000 US dollars, which it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot in RMB. But this year she can maybe get breaking to about 60,000 yuan, which is like $8,000. Here, another cotton socks factory owner says, we've hit products today, and then tomorrow we have a copycat of that, which sells at 60% of our price, and they're just impossible to compete. Now, that raises another problem, which is Chinese counterfeit goods and Chinese cheap products, which we'll talk about at the end of this part. And in this video today, in the city of Tangshan, Hebei province, a screen at a local billiard hall reads, from now on, our store will charge a 104 service fee to American customers. If you have any questions, please consult the US Embassy. And then a netizen asked the boss, do you even have any US customers? And he replied, no. So the whole thing is just like, it's really awkward for China. But that's why I'm saying Trump is doing the Thanos on the CCP when it comes to this area, because they're the ones who really are going to be struggling. Actually, not them, because they don't really care about the people. It's the people that are struggling. But let's first talk about what exactly is happening with the Chinese government when they're retaliating against this. Now, some of the things they've done, for example, they have their own 84%. They're saying that they're banning US service exports to China, halting IP protection for US companies, imposing forced tech transfers, banning US food and agricultural products, limiting access to China's financial markets, and most importantly, devalue the RMB. Now, all these strategies have already existed. This is not something new. They've done this, just not publicly announcing it, right? For example, you have the forced transfer of technology, halting the protection of foreign companies, the US company IP protections. That's what any foreign company has to do when they go to China. When they try to get into the Chinese market, they're forced to do a joint venture with a Chinese company. Eventually what happens is that joint venture company in China steals the technology from the foreign company, kicks them out. That's what happened with the bullet train technology. German and Japanese technology forced transfer to Chinese companies, and then they started building their own high-speed rail. So this is not new. They also enacted protectionist policies, right? US imports to China, Chinese importing US products to China, limiting access to Chinese financial markets. All these things have already been in place, such as the cases that they're trying to just openly say we're doing this. They've already done this for a while. But when it comes to devaluing the RMB, the Chinese currency, there's a big issue here, right? Trump says he knows. He's accusing the CCP of doing this in order, obviously the long-term goal of devaluing the RMB was that for the same amount of dollars, you can buy more products from China, right, when you're purchasing things. And this is really good because it gave China a lot of different leeways when it comes to, you can export more things, you make more money, but also at the same time, you're building reliance, you're building a supply chain, and you're controlling, right? So in turn, what they do with the money that they make is they go out and then they use a lot of this to create further financial chaos to drive out domestic merchants, domestic companies, and then they're also essentially taking over the manufacturing of the United States and then just dominating that around the world. So it's a big problem for the United States, obviously, but for China, that's the strategy they've been doing. So devaluing the RMB is a way for them to dominate the world through manufacturing. Now, Trump actually has a lot of hands to still play. The tariffs are just the first step when it comes to China. And I ultimately think the real goal for the US to do the tariffs is to eventually negotiate a free trade, zero tariffs with all other countries except for China. And that's really the big focus. Some people are calling this like the Ronald Reagan strategy against the Soviet Union, but Trump is doing it. I really don't think he's actively trying to destroy the CCP in the sense of like ideological challenges. But he's really doing this from a perspective of just trade in general, right? This is sort of like the byproduct of what happened. Now, what exactly can Trump do? Well, one of the possibilities that today the Treasury Secretary raised is potentially delisting Chinese companies on the US stock market. Now, this should have been done for a while now. The reason is half of these companies listed on the US stock market are like shell companies. They're just there to loop the money into their own pockets. They don't provide any actual service to the US market or the US consumers. And what they're essentially doing is they're there to get foreign cash. And then, their real operation is still back in China. So it's a big Ponzi scheme for that part. So delisting them will be really good. But another thing is if you declare China as a country that manipulates their currency, well, that could change the trade relations with the United States, right? Because right now, China and the United States have something called a PNTR, which is a permanent normal trade relations, allowing China to enjoy a lot of the free trade policies enacted by the United States and its partners. So removing that is obviously another layer of destroying the Chinese exports. And actually, if you look at what the CCP released today alongside their retaliations, is a list, it's a laundry list of things that they're afraid of. And the number one thing that they don't want the US to do is what I just mentioned, repeal the permanent normal trade relation status, which this is what made China flourish in the 2000s, right? Ascension to the WTO, this stuff allowed free trade policies to exist while China is really, they have not fulfilled any of the free trade obligations since they've joined the WTO. And for 25 years, people just gave money to China because they're like, yeah, eventually one day they'll change. They didn't really do that. It's also a kill shot in the sense that if you remove this, because they haven't been obligating to free market practices, what you're going to be doing is you're denormalizing or reorganizing your relations with China fundamentally. And then that means, if you leave the US trading sphere, it's impossible to be as rich as you are now. And then so China's economy, as we've seen now, it's very fragile, right? The manufacturing is gone. And then so the next step for China is they don't want the trade to stop because they've devalued their currency so much that if you no longer trade at that value, then you've already destroyed the worth of your money. And without the US dollars, really, you can't function in today's world because of that dominance to the market. The second thing they're afraid of is the trade and investment restrictions on national security grounds, right? So this again ties into the CCP using unfair trade practices. If those are defined based on national security rules, then again, that means the CCP can't take advantage of the US market like they have done before. You have other areas like expanded export controls, Section 301 tariffs, which are due to the trade barriers China put up. You have the Section 232 import investigations, essentially what's coming into the US. You also have one which is the de minimis exemption rules. So anything under $800 as of right now, they don't have to pay tax on that when things are shipped to the United States. But after May 1st or May 2nd, that is going away. So for the longest time, Chinese exporters, including exporting counterfeit goods, can just value it at, say, $300. Instead, they say like $100 or even sometimes $20, and then they don't pay any tax on that. Again, this is like you're actively allowing Chinese cheap goods from Temu, Shein, and other companies into the US for such a low cost that they're destroying the domestic competition. Their quality is not good, but they're cheap, right? So you're building reliance, you're making people buy Chinese products, they're making money, they don't have to pay the tax on it when they import to the US, and then so it's a really bad thing, and Trump's getting rid of that. So this again will help to balance that trade relationship that China has enjoyed so much with the free market, yet they themselves have not been changing. All right, thanks so much for watching this episode. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.